Welcome to the SBCA podcast, Component Connection, where we explore the people, ideas, trends, and innovations shaping the market and the future of structural building components. Whether you're on the shop floor, in the office, in the yard, or out in the field, we're glad you're here.
Hello, I'm Molly Butz, Managing Director for SBCA, and I'll be your host for this episode of Component Connection Lumber Insights. I'm joined today by Justin Binning and Ken Timmins. Justin and Ken are lumber traders from American International Forest Products, or AIFP. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Thanks, Molly. How's it going, Molly?
It's good. I'm wondering how it's going over there. It's been a hot second since we've had a chance to talk to each other. It's been, a month since our last Lumber Insights?
Yeah. Been like always. It's like time flies, and this year's flying by. August now. Crazy.
I don't know how we got to August, guys. I really don't. But since it's been so long, why don't we just start off kind of how we normally do with a recap of the last, 4 weeks, 4.5 or so. So yeah, what's been happening?
Yeah, well, I missed a full week of it because this is my first day back in the office after a week. I got to travel to Nevada, and my son had his last baseball tournament of the year. So
oh, that's exciting.
It was super exciting, super fun. Yeah. And I was kind of worried about today because I'm like, I feel, a little disconnected from, when you're out of the office for an extended period of time. But come to find out, I didn't miss a whole heck of a lot. Always keeping an eye on emails and staying in touch, but always trying to, when out of the office, trying to do the best I can to check out. But anyways, not a whole heck of a lot of change. The market had been grinding up ever so slowly over the past few weeks. Some items had tightened up on some of your prime lengths, we'll call it 2x4 16s, 14s on the west side. Stress grade had been pretty findable. Certainly felt like we'd found a bottom a few weeks back, and prices had increased, substantially in 4-inch and 6-inch and out of a lot of locations or mills. Now it just kind of feels a little flat again. It just feels like the grind mode, but we've been in grind mode, but any sort of price appreciation feels to be slipping, so it just, I don't know. We got through a lot of that bad heat that was in the U.S. South that it kind of felt like it zapped consumption. That's kind of subsided. So kind of wondering and see if we're going to see an uptick in purchasing from a price standpoint across really every dimension. And yellow pine in the U.S. South is still, flashing green for me in terms of value. And, we've got this uncertainty in tariff negotiations going on up north. We were kind of waiting to see if that would impact, how that would impact. It was met with kind of a ho-hum, another day in the lumber business for the most part. I still think there's the idea that can put some added pressure on yellow pine pricing in the near future. And I think as the longer we go through these stretches with what we're dealing with between the U.S. and Canada, and the more that people are being more open to switching species, and obviously I'm pointing out yellow pine in particularly, I just think the longer this goes, the more people are going to kind of adapt and start switching to pine. And I feel like that's happening, and it's going to continue to happen even more. So with that said, there's more production. Now, not right this second. We've actually taken some production out, but I know the long game in the U.S. South is to continue to get bigger, faster, and stronger down there with production. So, but at this housing start number that we have right now, we really just have an overall liquidity issue, right? Demand has slowed. Single family housing has slowed. We've got a record number of unsold homes. Well, maybe not a record, but in the last 2 decades, we're one of the highest levels we've been with new home construction that's gone unsold. So we're just in a fight it out year right now. And I think we've got obviously a lot of good things on the horizon, but in the near future. But I think, we're just kind of going to be in a slugfest, I think, the remainder of the year. And I think overall price stability will be intact. I just don't look for a lot of big, harsh swings to finish out this year, either up or down.
I'm having a lot of fun in the West. I don't know how else to say it. The last time we recorded, I wasn't present. Justin took the home, which I appreciate. In early July, I was out in Idaho visiting with some sawmill partners, as well as distributors all across the country, wholesalers, end users, really big gathering of high volume lumber folks getting together, having a couple soda pops, hanging out, discussing business, discussing how the first half of the year has been, how we anticipate the second half will be. Lots of good insight from that. Did the same sort of song and dance here in Oregon a couple weeks after. Again, lots of West Coast, Mountain State, Western U.S. folks at that event. And I'd say the overall tone is very similar regardless of who you talk to. Everybody starts out by saying, oh, it's 2025, it's a tough year, so on and so forth. But as you kind of unfold these conversations and keep peeling the onion back, there's a lot of business out there. And we're looking, as we start into August, and as a company, we're looking back at July, there was a lot of record months in our office. Lots of people selling and trading higher volumes than you really would have anticipated at the beginning of July. It doesn't matter if it's a veteran trader of 45 years, a journeyman of 10, or a rookie that's been on the phones for 6 months. There's a lot of people putting up very impressive volumes of trades, which is not really the way the market looks from the outside. But when you get your hands dirty, boots on the ground, there's actually quite a bit of business getting done. One trend I've definitely noticed is each individual market seems to have businesses that are doing significantly higher volumes than some of the competitors. There seems to be one line getting the share of business per market is something I've noticed on our trading floor as you go coast to coast. Not every market is as hot as others, but some markets are a little cold while there's one distributor or one end user or whatever it may be lighting it up, while some of the others are kind of fighting for the remaining chunk of the business. The classic 80-20 Pareto's principle, very much in effect there. I had one individual who I know listens to this podcast, won't say him by name, but I know they're going to hear this, tell me to my face about how slow their market was. And by the time I had driven back from the sawmill back to the trading floor, 2-hour drive, they had bought 5 rail cars from me. And it was within a couple hours of them saying how slow they were, which I don't disagree. And I believe that overall sentiment. But I think if you read Random Lengths print and take that as your Bible, you're really going to be misled to the overall tone of this market. And to use a very bad food analogy that I've used many times over the years, it's like a crock pot you left on overnight. On the surface, yeah, it looks flat, stale, unenthusiastic, but you put a corn chip in there and the cheese at the bottom of the crock pot's way hotter than you thought it was when you lifted the lid off. I mean, this thing is sneaky strong. And to piggyback on what Justin's saying, there's a lot of turbulence in international trade, as we've been discussing, particularly with lumber, with Canada, which has raised a lot of Canadian mill prices significantly over the last 30, 45 days. And I think a big reason why I'm kind of demonstrating the overall action out of the West is because those Western products are stretching further across the U.S. than they typically do. Products that routinely sell into Utah, Arizona, Colorado, Texas are going into Georgia, the Carolinas, Florida. Those products are of value compared to the traditional species. There's more substituting to fur, done for hemp for white fur products across the country than there is or has been all of 2025 so far.
So that's because the folks that are further east aren't pulling their lumber in down from Canada. They're pulling it across the country from over by you guys. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, and this is a sweeping generalization, but you might be able to save 10 to 15% just by substituting to a different product. In a lot of cases, fur is superior in terms of strength and visual appearance in a lot of markets, particularly for component manufacturers. So you can save money and get a better product. I mean, I think most of the time, if I'm at a Mexican restaurant, they say, hey, would you like top shelf tequila in your margarita for the same price? Most people say yes. That's exactly what's going on with lumber all over the country. Seen it a lot in select shock products, seen it a lot in MSR products in fur.
So can you use the term, the phrase volumes of trades? Is this different from what you've seen in the past? So like, is this a few people buying a lot of wood? Is this a lot of people buying a little wood? Or is it kind of a mix of both that you're like, is it a normal trading season or has that the feel of the trade changed?
Little bit of both. I'd say in general, mostly a lot of people buying smaller pieces of wood, right? Okay. More participants, lower quantities. But there has been people who really stick their neck out and they believe in where the market's going and they have bought 60, 75, 90 days of wood. That also has happened. Now, I don't think there's a lot of customers doing that. In my trading experience, about a decade, that was more a trend when I started than it has been over the last 5 years in the post-COVID trading era. But there are still some people kind of going against the grain and doing that. I mean, I think you could probably say 50 times in our recordings in 2025 alone, we used the phrase the just-in-time model,
Yes.
which is something some people are still using, but there's other guys and gals who are buying blocks of wood and spacing them out and locking in. Maybe you have September, October, November sold for the trusses you're making or the jobs you took or whatever. And there's people putting on orders for the future to lock in their profits and take volatility off the table. There's a lot of that going on right now.
Yeah, and I think that touches a little bit to your earlier point about some consolidation in certain marketplaces. And again, we keep talking or referencing to price. A lot of these species, it's saying buy. I mean, it's just, if you look historically where we've been the last few years, we got some great prices. And then you bring in the uncertainty of spruce, and it's like, well, what does the future hold for me? Probably higher prices. If I know I have business sold, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, right? So it's like, take some chips off the table, buy some of your wood out for stuff you've got coming up. You can't really lose. And Ken's right. We're busy like every day. And I know we've touched on this in previous podcasts where it doesn't feel busy, right? Don't always feel busy, but then you look up and you're like, you're having a great day. And that seems to happen every day. And it also feels like as we go through the trading floor, every day there's a different superstar, right? So it's not one guy selling all the wood. It's one guy has a good day. And then the next guy that maybe only had an order or didn't have any sells 12 to one of his, key accounts or whatever. So everybody's taking part in the market. And I think Ken said it really well. There's a lot of people partaking in the market consistently. I think, 80% smaller volumes. And then you've got your people out there continuing to garner market share and sees value in today's prices and is not hesitant to pull the trigger if it makes sense. So,
well, and as someone who so for anyone that doesn't know that's listening, I live in Northern Illinois, and you wouldn't think that we would be having a ton of poor air quality as a result of the fires coming down from Canada. But so that's been on my mind, like, oh, how is that gonna, what are you guys gonna have to say about that to me today? But if people aren't purchasing Canadian lumber, then are the fires really even having an impact on anything? I mean, let me rephrase. Obviously, they're having major impacts on people's lives, but from the trading perspective, are we seeing anything from that?
From pricing and availability for when I'm trading, no, hasn't had a significant impact. It's not a piece of daily conversations. Without hopping on the soapbox too much, because it's something I feel very passionately about, it is unfortunate the level of forest fires that we experience year after year.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're inevitable. Lightning strikes and certain things happen. But there is a level of forest management that we have, especially in the U.S. I can't really speak to Canada as much. We've gotten to a point of trying to, I hate to use this term, but hug the trees so much that we stay out of the woods. We don't do control birds. We don't do all the things to manage the forest, which leads to too much kindling on the ground, and they all go up in flames. And as long as we could manage them and use them, we can continue to sustain them and regrow them. I think people really confuse the term clear cutting with forest management, right? If you clear cut a forest and build an apartment complex on top of it, yes, that's terrible. That tree's never coming back. If you clear cut woods to replant and regrow and reharvest, that's the best thing you can do. So I promise I won't get on the soapbox. I kind of am, and I'll hop back off. So far, thankfully, these forest fires haven't had a overly monumentous impact on what we're doing in the construction sphere in terms of pricing and availability. They are significant. My heart goes out for those affected, but hopefully we don't have as bad of a fire season as we do in years past. There's been some really bad ones in the 2020s.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I pulled it up because I hadn't heard anything in terms of the air quality. You're getting swamped. It looks like all the way up in that upper Midwest, just kind of straight up from the Chicago, Milwaukee, Green Bay, Duluth, all the way west to Duluth.
It's been very hazy. We've had some mornings, and it's best to be inside if you have any kinds of medical issues that affect your breathing.
Well, it's no joke. I mean, we certainly know all about that here. We felt like we had a lot of summers where
stay indoors, unfortunately.
Or burning. Yeah.
Well, given what you guys have said so far, I haven't heard you suggest that anything is particularly hard to find. If anything, there may be a surplus of some things, but have you heard of anything our component manufacturers might want to be thinking about as far as, just availability?
Well, I'd say this. I think overall tone across all my meetings of people from all around the country in July, face-to-face, over the phone, via email, feels like a lot of people are under the general consensus that pricing continues to grind up, right? And there might be an undertone of it grinding up begrudgingly. There might be an undertone of it grinding up patriotically. You can kind of diagnose that however you want. Seems like in dry species, things are going to continue to go up to some degree. Not a runaway freight train, but they're going up. Now, that being said, it's still not extremely difficult to find some sort of value in the trade, whether maybe you get a good price on a quick loading rail car or a strong tally, or you can substitute to a better species for the price of what was somewhat cheaper. That's all possible. I would say the one outlier to that as a Western trader is green, dug for primarily into California, which has been relatively quiet. I do think it continues to drift off gently, and I think we're very close to the bottom. I'm saying it that way to not use any numbers to upset the Department of Justice or the Sherman Act or the Clayton Antitrust Act or any of that. Yeah. I think we're very close. Now let's just pretend it bottoms today while we're recording this podcast. I don't know if the follow through in Northern and Southern California is enthusiastic. It might be there, but it's not going to be a monumentous shift by any means, like we're accustomed to over the last handful of years. It's kind of a slow burn of a market. It's not a giant bonfire that was, covered in lighter fluid and gasoline. It's not, it's a nice little fireplace for every 15 minutes you throw on a medium-sized log. Just continues to kind of smolder with heat and action and activity, but the fire's not going out. We got a big sack of firewood and we're sitting there in a chair through the night, keeping this thing going. I know that's a weird analogy to encapsulate the U.S. softwood lumber market. But I think with the exception of green Doug fir in the state of California, it continues to go higher before it goes lower.
Well, I guess the last thing I'll ask is then, any advice for the next few weeks before we meet again in, another 30-ish days? Just, what can our folks be thinking about doing? Or do we just is no news good news and we simmer on?
Yeah, I think, I feel like there's some things percolating for the end of the quarter, for first quarter, just some larger inquiries. You're starting to feel maybe some jobs here and there. I think typically it's kind of a tougher month. August can be a grinder, right? The dog days of summer and the heat. Fall's right around the corner, though. Kids are back in school. People settle back down, usually have a nice little fall push. I just think again, where we're at with pricing, it's hard to lose here. I don't necessarily think you have to, go out over the limb. But if you did, I don't think it's going to be a horrible decision either that would bite you. But I think, stay close to the ones you trust. And there's a ton of value out there every single day. And there's nothing wrong with buying some lumber. I'll just try to keep it short and sweet, Yeah. Nothing wrong with the good prices. No. And again, with what I do, the volatility with spruce will put some pressure again on yellow pine. Definitely can. So,
Kenny?
I would say I'm going to be pretty direct with what's going on in the West. If you use 6-foot web stock, buy it. That's going to keep going up. If you use OSB for wall panels, buy it. Or somebody's going to buy a warehouse, stuff it all in there, wait until this thing goes up. There's another product that is scraping the bottom and bound to go higher. As far as the other products, check in with your trusted suppliers, create a plan on how you're going to navigate Q3, Q4. There's different strategies I'd implore for different markets. If you want help with those, reach out to us. We're happy to help everybody. And we're really excited to see all sorts of folks in Omaha here in a couple of weeks. It's going to be a great BCM seeds, one of our favorite times of the year. Looking forward to shaking hands and checking in with folks and helping them navigate the market.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that wraps up our episode for this week. You've made a very good point to wrap up our episode. If you haven't registered for BCMC yet and you happen to hear this on Friday, our early bird pricing does end on Friday. So make sure you get online and get registered and catch those early bird prices that are, at least a decent discount from where you'll be in a few weeks. So appreciate that little plug from you, Ken. And I appreciate you both. So Justin, Ken, thank you for your continued expertise and enthusiasm. And thank you all out there for listening to SBCA's podcast, Component Connection. If you've enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, please like it and share it with others. Stay up to date and in the know by subscribing to Component Connection on whatever podcast platform you use most.
Thanks for listening to Component Connection, brought to you by SBCA. If there's a topic you'd like us to explore in a future episode, email us at podcast@sbcacomponents.com. Until next time, stay connected.